The stagecoach lurched to a violent stop in front of the Oro Grande, New Mexico General Store, sending up a cloud of dust that matched the uncertainty churning in Declan Edwards's gut as he watched a woman at least 15 years, his senior, step down onto the wooden boardwalk with the grace of someone who had lived enough life to know exactly how to carry herself. His breath caught not from disappointment, but from something he had not expected to feel when Rebecca Ellis turned to face him with eyes the color of aged whiskey and a smile that spoke of hard-won wisdom. The letter had not mentioned her age, only that she was a widow seeking a new start, and Declan had assumed she would be young, perhaps early 20s like most mail-order brides arriving in the New Mexico territory in this year of 1882. But Rebecca was clearly in her late 30s, her auburn hair showing threads of silver at the temples, her face bearing the fine lines of a woman who had laughed and cried and survived in equal measure. "Mr. Edwards." Her voice was low and melodic, carrying across the afternoon heat with confidence. Declan removed his hat, his calloused hands suddenly clumsy. At 24, he had expected to be the experienced one in this arrangement, the one to guide and protect. Now he stood before a woman who seemed to need neither, and the words he had practiced for weeks dissolved on his tongue. "Yes, madam, I am Declan Edwards. You must be Miss Rebecca Ellis." He stepped forward, dust from his work clothes floating in the bright sunlight. "I suppose the stage-coach conductor already informed you that I might not be what you expected." She lifted her chin slightly, and Declan saw the defensive posture of someone who had faced rejection before. The other men loitering outside the saloon were watching with undisguised interest. Billy Morton, the blacksmith's apprentice, let out a low whistle. "That is your mail-order bride, Edwards. She looks old enough to be your mother." Heat flared in Declan's chest, but before he could respond, Rebecca turned to face Billy with a look that could have frozen the Rio Grande in summer. "And you look foolish enough to be anybody's mistake, young man. But here we both are, making the best of what God gave us." Billy's face went red as the other men erupted in laughter. Declan found himself grinning despite the awkwardness of the situation. There was fire in this woman, spirit that had nothing to do with youth and everything to do with character. "Madam, I apologize for the lack of manners in this town. Please, let me help you with your trunk." Declan moved toward the luggage the driver was unloading, but Rebecca had already hoisted a carpetbag over her shoulder. "I have been carrying my own burdens for quite some time, Mr. Edwards, but I appreciate the offer." She studied him with those shrewd eyes. "I understand if you want to send me back on the next stage. I should have been more forthcoming in my letters about my age. It was dishonest of me, and I have no excuse except that I was desperate for a new beginning." Declan picked up her trunk, testing its weight. Heavy, like it contained a whole life. "How old are you, if you do not mind my asking?" 38. "Old enough to know better, young enough to hope for more." She met his gaze without flinching. "And you are what, 23, 24? 24. Old enough to make my own decisions, young enough to learn from someone with more experience." The words came out before he could stop them, surprising them both. Rebecca's expression softened, the defensive walls lowering just a fraction. "That is a generous way of looking at a bad situation." "Maybe it is not a bad situation." Declan shifted the trunk to his other shoulder. "My ranch is about 3 miles outside town. I have a small house, nothing fancy. 2 bedrooms, so you will have your privacy while we figure this out. I am not going to force you into anything, Miss Ellis. We can take our time, get to know each other proper. You are serious." It was not a question, but Declan answered anyway. "I wrote for a mail-order bride because I wanted a partner, someone to build a life with. The letters you sent showed intelligence and kindness." You wrote about practical matters, about managing a household and keeping accounts. You never once mentioned love or romance, which I appreciated because those things cannot be promised in a letter. They have to be earned. He started walking toward where his wagon waited at the end of the street. Age was never part of my requirements, Miss Ellis. I am more interested in character. She fell into step beside him, her stride long and confident despite the layers of travel-worn skirts. You are either the most mature 24-year-old I have ever met, or the most naive. Maybe both. Declan allowed himself a small smile. But I meant what I said. We can give this a chance, see if we suit. If we do not, I will pay for your passage to wherever you want to go, no questions asked. They reached the wagon and Declan loaded her trunk into the back. Rebecca stood looking at the dusty main street of Oro Grande, at the adobe buildings and wooden storefronts, at the mountains rising in the distance like ancient guardians. The October sun beat down with persistent warmth, and somewhere a dog barked at nothing. I was married before, she said quietly. My husband Samuel died 3 years ago from pneumonia. We had a good marriage, nothing passionate or romantic, but solid and respectful. We worked his family's farm in Missouri until his death, and then his brother made it clear I was no longer welcome. I sold what I could and used the money to start over, but jobs for widows are scarce and usually unpleasant. When I saw your advertisement in the newspaper, it seemed like providence. Declan climbed up onto the wagon seat and offered her his hand. I am sorry for your loss. My parents died 5 years ago, cholera epidemic. I came west after that, worked as a ranch hand until I saved enough to buy my own place. It is not much, but it is mine. Well, mostly mine. Still paying off the bank, but I am making progress. Rebecca accepted his hand and settled onto the seat beside him. Her hand was small but work-roughened, the hand of someone who knew labor. What made you think of a mail-order bride? He clicked to the horses and they started moving, wheels creaking. Loneliness, I suppose. The work is hard and the days are long, and I found myself wanting someone to share it all with, someone to talk to at the end of the day, someone to plan the future with. He kept his eyes on the road ahead. I could have courted local girls, but most of them are 16 or 17, still children really. I wanted someone who understood what marriage means, the work of it. And you are not disappointed that I am so much older. Her voice held genuine curiosity rather than insecurity. Declan considered the question as they left the town behind, the landscape opening up into rolling hills dotted with scrub grass and juniper. I would be lying if I said it was what I expected, but disappointed? No. Surprised, yes. Uncertain about what it means, definitely. But you stood up to Billy Morton without blinking. You carried your own bag, and you were honest with me even though it might have cost you this opportunity. Those things tell me more about your character than your age does. Rebecca was quiet for a moment, watching the scenery pass. You are nothing like I expected either. Your letters were practical and straightforward, outlining what you could offer and what you hoped for in a wife. But you seemed rigid, perhaps a bit cold. Meeting you, I see someone much more open-minded than your words suggested. I am not good with written words. My schooling was limited. Declan felt heat rise in his cheeks. I had the school teacher in town help me with those letters, make them sound proper. I hope that was not too dishonest. We both had our small deceptions then. Rebecca's lips curved into a smile. Perhaps that makes us even. The road wound through a shallow valley, following a dry creek bed that would run full during the spring snowmelt. Declan pointed out landmarks as they went. The old oak where he sometimes saw eagles, the rock formation that looked like a sleeping giant, the property line that marked the beginning of his ranch. His land stretched across 160 acres, half of it suitable for grazing, the rest too rocky for much except stubborn vegetation and wildlife. The house came into view as they crested a small rise, a simple adobe structure with a wooden porch and a roof of rough-hewn planks. It was not impressive, but it was well maintained, the walls freshly whitewashed and the porch swept clean. A barn stood 50 yards away, and a corral held 4 horses that looked up with interest at their approach. "It is modest," Declan said unnecessarily, suddenly seeing his home through her eyes and finding it lacking. "It is honest," Rebecca replied. "I like that better." He pulled the wagon up to the house and set the brake, then jumped down and came around to help her descend. This time, she accepted his assistance without protest, perhaps recognizing it as courtesy rather than assumption of weakness. Her hand felt warm in his, and when she looked up at him from her lower position on the wagon, he was struck by the intelligence in her eyes, the depth of experience written in every line of her face. "Welcome home, Miss Ellis," he said, and meant it. "Thank you, Mr. Edwards." She released his hand and turned to survey the property. "What do you raise here?" "Cattle, mostly. I have about 40 head right now, hoping to expand next year if the market stays good. I also keep chickens for eggs and a milk cow. There is a vegetable garden behind the house, though it is mostly finished for the season. I hunt for fresh meat when I can." He retrieved her trunk and carried it toward the house. "It is enough to live on, barely. Some months are tighter than others." Rebecca followed him inside, and Declan tried to see the interior as she must see it. One main room served as kitchen, dining area, and sitting space. A fireplace dominated one wall, its stones blackened from use. Simple furniture spoke of function over form, a table with 4 chairs, a rocking chair, a few shelves holding dishes and supplies. 2 doors led to the bedrooms, one on each side of the main room. "The bedroom on the right is yours," Declan said, setting her trunk down. "It has a bed, a dresser, and a small table. Nothing fancy, but it is clean and the roof does not leak." Rebecca walked to the bedroom door and looked inside. The afternoon light filtered through the single window, illuminating a space that was indeed simple but well kept. The bed was neatly made with what appeared to be a hand-sewn quilt, and a small vase on the dresser held dried wildflowers that had long since faded. "Did you pick those flowers?" she asked. "My neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, brought them by when I told her I was getting married." She insisted the room needed a woman's touch. Declan rubbed the back of his neck. "I am not good at that sort of thing. They are lovely." Rebecca turned back to face him. "Mr. Edwards, I think we should have an honest conversation about expectations. Declan, please call me Declan." "And yes, we should talk." He gestured to the table. "Let me make some coffee." They sat across from each other as the coffee brewed, the silence more comfortable than awkward. Declan found himself studying her face, noting the way the lines around her eyes crinkled even when she was not smiling, suggesting a lifetime of happiness, or at least good humor. Her hands rested on the table, and he could see a pale band on her left ring finger where a wedding band had once resided. "I came here expecting to marry you," Rebecca began once they both had steaming cups in front of them. "I knew from your letters that you wanted a quick ceremony, something practical and legal. But given the circumstances, I think we should delay that." Relief and something that might have been disappointment warred in Declan's chest. "I agree. We should take time to know each other. I can help around the ranch, earn my keep while we decide if this arrangement will work." She wrapped her hands around the cup, though the day was still warm. "I am a good cook, I can keep house, and I know how to work. On the farm in Missouri, I helped with everything from planting to harvest. I can sew, preserve food, tend animals. I am not afraid of hard work." I never doubted that. Declan took a sip of coffee, grateful for something to do with his hands. But I do not expect you to work like a hired hand. If we are going to try to build something here, it should be a partnership. What did you imagine when you thought about having a wife? Rebecca's directness was both unnerving and refreshing. Declan considered the question carefully. Someone to share the burden of running this place. Someone whose company I could enjoy at the end of a long day. Maybe children eventually if we were blessed. I know that is not romantic, but it is honest. Children. Rebecca's expression grew complicated. Declan, I am 38 years old. I could possibly still bear children, but the risk increases with age and there is no guarantee. If children are important to you, you should marry someone younger. Are children important to you? He asked instead of answering. She looked down at her coffee. Samuel and I tried for years. I never conceived. I do not know if the failing was mine or his, but the result was the same. I made peace with being childless, though I would not say it did not hurt. Then maybe we are well matched in that regard. Declan leaned back in his chair. I would like children if it happens, but it is not a requirement for me. I am more interested in building something stable, something lasting. Children would be a blessing, but they are not the foundation. Rebecca met his eyes, searching for something. You are serious about this, about trying to make this work despite the age difference, despite everything. I am serious about seeing if we suit each other. The age difference is just a number, Miss Ellis. What matters is whether we respect each other, whether we can work together, whether we can build a life worth living. He paused. My father used to say that wisdom and beauty only improve with time. I never fully understood what he meant until now. Color rose in her cheeks, the first sign of vulnerability he had seen from her. That is a kind thing to say. It is an honest thing to say. Declan finished his coffee and stood. I need to see to the animals before dark. You should rest from your journey, get settled in your room. We can have supper later, nothing fancy. Tomorrow I can show you around the property properly, introduce you to the neighbors. Rebecca stood as well. I would rather help with the animals if you do not mind. Sitting still after days on that stagecoach is the last thing I want. So they went together to the barn, and Declan found himself explaining his operation while Rebecca asked intelligent questions about feed and breeding and market prices. She moved among the animals without fear, her hands confident as she helped him measure out grain and check water troughs. When one of the horses, a temperamental mare named Dulce, tried to nip at him, Rebecca caught the movement and stepped in smoothly, speaking low words that calmed the animal. You have a way with horses, Declan observed. Samuel and I had 4 draft horses on the farm. I spent more time with them than with most people. She stroked Dulce's nose. Animals are honest. They do not care about age or appearance. They respond to how you treat them. People could learn from that. Some people do. She glanced at him sideways. You might be one of them. They worked together until sunset, falling into an easy rhythm that surprised them both. When they returned to the house, Declan showed Rebecca where he kept the food stores and cooking supplies, then retreated to give her space in the kitchen. She moved around the unfamiliar space with efficiency, and soon the smell of frying salt pork and baking cornbread filled the small house. They ate at the table as darkness settled outside, the conversation flowing more easily than either had expected. Rebecca told him about growing up in Missouri, the daughter of a shopkeeper who had taught her to read and keep accounts. She spoke of her marriage to Samuel, a quiet man who had been her father's friend first, 20 years her senior when they married. It had been an arrangement similar to this one, born of practical need rather than passion, but it had grown into something comfortable and even affectionate over the years. Declan talked about his childhood in Ohio, the son of farmers who had worked hard and loved deeper. He described the devastation of losing them both within a week of each other. The way the land they had worked their whole lives had gone to creditors, leaving him with nothing but grief and a fierce determination to build something of his own. He spoke of his years working on other people's ranches, learning the business and saving every penny until he finally had enough to buy this piece of New Mexico territory and start over. "We have both known loss," Rebecca said softly as they cleared the dishes. "Maybe that is another thing we have in common. Maybe loss teaches us what really matters." Declan pumped water into the basin for washing. "My parents had something special. They worked hard, but they also laughed together, supported each other. I want that kind of partnership if I can find it." "Samuel and I had respect and companionship. It was good, but it was not what your parents had." Rebecca began washing the dishes, her movements methodical. "Part of that was the age difference. He saw me as young and inexperienced, even though I was 21 when we married. He made the decisions and I followed them. It worked, but there was always an imbalance. I do not want that." Declan picked up a cloth to dry the dishes she handed him. "I want an equal partnership, someone who will tell me when I am wrong, who will share ideas and plans. Someone I can rely on and who can rely on me. That is a rare thing to want, especially in a wife." Rebecca handed him a plate. "Most men want obedience. Most men are fools." The words came out more forcefully than he intended, and Rebecca laughed. It was the first time he had heard her really laugh, and the sound transformed her face, erasing years and revealing the girl she must have been. Declan found himself smiling in response, something warm unfurling in his chest. "I think I am going to like you, Declan Edwards," she said. "I think I am already starting to like you, Rebecca Ellis." That night, lying in his bed and listening to the soft sounds of the house settling, Declan thought about the strange turn his life had taken. He had been prepared for disappointment when that stagecoach arrived, for a woman who would be wrong in 100 different ways. Instead, he had found someone who challenged his expectations and made him reconsider what he was actually looking for in a partner. Age was just a number, his father had always said. What mattered was character, integrity, and the willingness to work for what you wanted. Rebecca had all three in abundance and more besides. She had strength without hardness, wisdom without superiority, and a dry humor that matched his own. The years between them seemed less important with every hour they spent together. In her own room, Rebecca lay awake and thought about the young man who had accepted her with such grace. She had expected rejection, perhaps even anger at her deception. Instead, Declan had seen past the surface to the person beneath, had judged her on her merits rather than her appearance. It was more than Samuel had ever done, more than she had dared hope for. There was something appealing about his straightforward honesty, his willingness to reconsider his assumptions. He was young, yes, but not immature. He had known hardship and loss, had built something from nothing, and his eyes held the steady gaze of someone who knew his own mind. If she was honest with herself, she found him attractive, not despite his youth, but because of the confidence it gave him, the optimism that had not yet been worn down by years of disappointment. Maybe this could work. Maybe they could build something together that neither had expected but both needed. The days that followed fell into a comfortable pattern. Declan rose at dawn to tend the animals and check the cattle scattered across his grazing land. Rebecca woke soon after and prepared breakfast, then spent her mornings cleaning and organizing the house that had clearly needed a woman's attention. The afternoons they worked together, repairing fence lines, moving cattle to better grazing, preparing the property for winter. They talked constantly, discovering shared interests and complementary skills. Rebecca knew herbs and medicinal plants, knowledge she had learned from her mother. Declan knew the land and weather, reading signs in the clouds and the behavior of animals. She taught him to make bread that did not turn out like rocks. He showed her how to shoot his rifle, patiently correcting her stance until she could hit a target at 50 yards. "You are a good teacher," she said after successfully hitting 3 targets in a row. "You are a good student." He took the rifle and reloaded it. "And you do not give up easily. I like that about you." "I learned early that giving up gets you nowhere." She watched him work, noting the economical grace of his movements. "My father used to say that persistence was worth more than talent." Smart man. Declan sighted down the rifle and fired, hitting a target at 100 yards. "How did he feel about you marrying Samuel?" "Relieved, I think." "I was already 21, practically a spinster in his eyes. Samuel was stable, reliable, a good provider. My father died 2 years after the wedding, content that I was settled." She paused. "I wonder what he would think of this situation." "What do you think he would think?" Rebecca considered the question. "I think he would approve. You are everything he valued, honest, hardworking, respectful." The age difference would give him pause, but he would see past it eventually. "And your mother?" "She died when I was 12. Fever took her quickly." Rebecca's voice grew soft. "I barely remember her, just impressions, really." The smell of lavender, her hands always moving, her voice singing hymns while she worked. Declan lowered the rifle. "I am sorry. Losing a parent young changes you." "It does. But I think it can change you for the better if you let it. It taught me not to take time for granted, to appreciate what you have while you have it." She looked at him directly. "That is why I am here, Declan. Because life is short and opportunities are rare, and I am not going to let pride or propriety rob me of a chance at something good." He held her gaze, something shifting in the air between them. "I am glad you came, Rebecca. I know we are still figuring this out, but I am glad. So am I." 2 weeks after her arrival, Declan took Rebecca to meet his nearest neighbors, the Rodriguez family who owned the ranch bordering his to the south. Carlos and Maria Rodriguez had lived in the area for 30 years, raising 6 children in a sprawling adobe house surrounded by cottonwood trees. They welcomed Rebecca with warmth that seemed genuine, Maria embracing her like an old friend while Carlos shook her hand with obvious approval. "Finally, someone to keep this boy in line," Carlos said, clapping Declan on the shoulder. "He works too hard, never takes time to enjoy life." "He is young, he has energy to burn," Maria chided her husband. "But yes, a woman's influence is good for any man." They shared a meal, the Rodriguez children ranging from 7 to 19, the house filled with noise and laughter. Rebecca watched the family dynamics with interest, noting how Carlos and Maria worked together, finishing each other's sentences and sharing looks that spoke of decades of partnership. This was what a good marriage looked like after years of cultivation, roots growing deep and branches intertwining until you could not separate one from the other. "Your wife is lovely," Maria told Declan as they cleared the table. "Mature, which is good. Young girls do not understand what marriage requires." "We are not married yet," Declan clarified. "We are getting to know each other first." Maria waved a dismissive hand. "Smart, but I see the way you look at her and the way she looks at you. That is already the beginning of love, whether you know it yet or not." Declan felt his ears burn. "It has only been 2 weeks. Time is not what matters. My mother knew my father for 3 days before they married, and they were happy for 40 years. When it is right, it is right." Maria patted his cheek. "Do not overthink it, young man. Follow your heart." On the ride home, Rebecca brought up the conversation she had overheard between Maria and Carlos about a dance being held in town the following Saturday. "They invited us to attend. Do you dance?" "Badly," Declan admitted. "But I am willing to embarrass myself if you want to go. I have not danced in years." Samuel did not care for social gatherings. She watched the landscape pass, the mountains painted purple by the setting sun. "But I think I would like to go, if you are willing to risk your reputation being seen with an older woman." Declan pulled the wagon to a stop, turning to face her fully. "Rebecca, I need you to understand something. I do not care what people think about the age difference. Not Billy Morton, not the town gossips, not anybody. What I care about is whether you and I can build something real together. Everything else is just noise." She met his eyes and he saw something vulnerable there, a carefully protected hope. "You mean that?" "I mean that." He reached out and took her hand, the first time he had initiated physical contact beyond helping her into and out of the wagon. "These past 2 weeks have been good. Better than good. I like working with you, talking with you, being around you. Age is the least interesting thing about you, Rebecca Ellis." Her fingers tightened around his. "I feel the same way. You are easy to be with, Declan. You make me laugh, you challenge me to try new things, you treat me like an equal. That is worth more than any number." They sat there in the gathering dusk, hands joined, something unspoken settling between them. It was not love, not yet, but it was the foundation on which love could be built, mutual respect and genuine affection, and the dawning realization that they might have found something neither had expected. "We should go to that dance," Declan said finally. "I want to show you off." Rebecca laughed. "You are going to show off a woman old enough to be your aunt. I am going to show off the most interesting woman in New Mexico territory." He clicked to the horses and they started moving again. "Let people talk. We know what this is." Saturday arrived with perfect autumn weather, cool and clear, the kind of day that made you grateful to be alive. Rebecca spent the morning washing her hair and pressing her best dress, a deep blue that brought out the color of her eyes. It was years out of fashion, but it was well made and still fit her figure. She looked at herself in the small mirror in her room and saw a woman on the edge of middle age, presentable but not remarkable. When she emerged, Declan was waiting in his good clothes, a clean white shirt and dark trousers, his hair still damp from washing. He looked young and handsome, and Rebecca felt a pang of doubt about the picture they would present together. "You look beautiful," he said, and the sincerity in his voice made her believe him. "You look very handsome yourself." She accepted his arm. "Are you sure about this?" "I have never been more sure of anything." The dance was held in the church hall, the space transformed with bunting and lanterns, a 3-piece band already warming up when they arrived. People turned to look as they entered, the conversations dipping and swelling as news of Declan's mail-order bride spread through the crowd. Rebecca held her head high, feeling Declan's solid presence beside her. Maria Rodriguez appeared immediately, embracing Rebecca and pulling her into a circle of women. "Ladies, this is Rebecca Ellis, Declan Edwards' bride. Rebecca, this is Senora Martinez, Mrs. Johnson, and Mrs. Wu. You will like them. They are not gossips." The women welcomed her with varying degrees of warmth, asking polite questions about her journey and her impressions of New Mexico. Rebecca handled the interrogation with grace, neither defensive about her age nor apologetic about her situation. She answered questions honestly, and gradually the women's curiosity transformed into acceptance. Across the room, Declan stood with a group of men including Carlos Rodriguez and the town sheriff, a grizzled man named Thomas Brent. They were less subtle in their assessment. "She is a handsome woman," the sheriff allowed. "Bit old for you, though, is she not?" "She is 38, Declan said evenly. "Old enough to know her own mind and experienced enough to be interesting. I am not complaining," Carlos laughed. "Good answer." "Maria says she likes her. which is high praise. My wife does not suffer fools, and she thinks your Rebecca is smart as a whip. She is. Declan watched Rebecca across the room, noting how she held her own among the other women. She is everything I hoped for and nothing like I expected. The best things in life are like that, Carlos said sagely. You planning to marry her soon, when she is ready. We agreed to take our time, make sure we suit. Declan accepted a cup of punch from a passing tray. But yes, I am planning to marry her if she will have me. She would be a fool not to, the sheriff said. You have a good reputation, Edwards. You work hard, pay your debts, treat people fairly. Any woman would be lucky to have you. The music started and couples began moving onto the floor. Declan excused himself and crossed to where Rebecca stood. He offered his hand with exaggerated formality. Miss Ellis, may I have this dance? I should warn you, it has been a very long time. But she placed her hand in his, letting him lead her onto the floor. They were awkward at first, Declan apologizing for stepping on her feet, Rebecca laughing as she tried to remember the steps. But gradually they found a rhythm, moving together with increasing confidence. Declan was not a skilled dancer, but he was steady and strong, guiding her through the turns with determination. This is nice, Rebecca said as they navigated around another couple. It is. Declan looked down at her, struck by how right it felt to hold her like this. Thank you for coming with me. Thank you for asking. She met his eyes and smiled. And for not caring what people think. They will talk regardless. We might as well give them something interesting to talk about. He spun her and she laughed, the sound pure and joyful. They danced 3 more songs, and then Declan reluctantly released her to other partners, while he danced with some of the local women who would have been offended to be ignored. He moved mechanically through the steps, his attention constantly drawn back to Rebecca, who was currently dancing with Carlos and laughing at something the older man said. Billy Morton approached during a break between songs, his expression a mixture of contrition and curiosity. Mr. Edwards, I wanted to apologize for what I said when Miss Ellis arrived. It was rude and uncalled for. Declan studied the younger man. What changed your mind? I saw you 2 dancing. You look happy together. Billy shuffled his feet. And my mother boxed my ears when she heard what I said. She told me age does not determine worth, and I was acting like a jackass. Your mother is a wise woman. Declan clapped Billy on the shoulder. Apology accepted, and you are right, we are happy together. As the evening wore on, Rebecca found herself genuinely enjoying the social interaction. The initial curiosity about her age faded as people got to know her, drawn in by her intelligence and self-possession. She shared recipes with the women, listened to their stories, offered advice when asked. These were good people, the kind of community where you could build a life. During a slow waltz, Declan pulled her closer than was strictly proper. Are you having a good time? A wonderful time. She let herself relax into his embrace. These are nice people. They are. And they like you, he paused. I like you, Rebecca. More than like you, if I am being honest, her heart skipped. Declan. I know we said we would take our time, and we should, but I want you to know how I am starting to feel. You make everything better just by being there. You make me laugh, you challenge me to think differently, you work beside me like a true partner. His voice dropped lower. When I think about the future now, you are in every picture. Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes. I feel the same way. I did not expect to feel this way, especially not so quickly, but you have been so kind, so accepting. You make me feel valued for who I am, not who I should be or used to be. That is a gift, Declan. Then we are giving each other gifts. He smiled down at her. Let us keep doing that. They stayed until the music ended, then drove home under a sky full of stars. The temperature had dropped with nightfall, and Rebecca shivered despite her shawl. Without a word, Declan wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close for warmth. She leaned into him, feeling the solid strength of him, breathing in the scent of soap and leather and something indefinably him. At the house, they lingered on the porch, neither quite ready for the evening to end. "Thank you for tonight," Rebecca said softly. "It meant more to me than you know. Thank you for being willing to try this, to give us a chance." Declan still had his arm around her, and neither of them had moved to break the contact. "Rebecca, can I kiss you?" She looked up at him, seeing the question and hope in his eyes. "Yes." He lowered his head slowly, giving her time to change her mind, and then his lips met hers in a kiss that was gentle and searching. Rebecca's hands came up to rest on his chest, feeling his heart beating rapidly beneath her palms. The kiss deepened, and she felt 14 years drop away, felt young and desired and hopeful in a way she had not felt since her own girlhood. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Declan rested his forehead against hers. "That was even better than I imagined." "You imagined kissing me?" She was smiling. She could hear it in her own voice. "Frequently. Especially after watching you work with the horses, or when you laugh at my terrible jokes, or really any time you are being yourself." He straightened, still holding her. "Too much honesty." "No such thing." She reached up and touched his face, feeling the slight stubble on his jaw. "I have been imagining kissing you too. Then we are matched in that as well." He kissed her again, this one briefer but no less sweet. "I should let you get inside, it is getting cold." "Stay out here with me a little longer," she said. "I am not ready for the day to end." So they stood together on the porch, wrapped in each other's arms, talking in low voices about everything and nothing. They discussed their favorite seasons, foods they missed from childhood, dreams they had tucked away. Rebecca told him about wanting to learn to read Spanish from Maria Rodriguez. Declan confessed his dream of one day breeding horses in addition to cattle, building something that would last generations. "Generations," Rebecca repeated softly. "You are still thinking about children. I am thinking about legacy. That can take many forms." He tightened his arms around her. "But yes, if we were blessed with children, I would welcome them. And if we are not, we can build a legacy in other ways. Teaching young people in the community, creating something that supports others, making this land produce and thrive. There are many ways to leave your mark on the world, Rebecca." "You are an unusual man, Declan Edwards. I am an ordinary man who is smart enough to recognize something extraordinary when I find it." He kissed the top of her head. "And I have found it in you." They finally went inside when the cold became too much to ignore, but they stood in the main room, reluctant to separate into their individual bedrooms. Finally, Rebecca stepped back. "Good night, Declan." "Good night, Rebecca." He caught her hand and brought it to his lips. "Sweet dreams." In her room, Rebecca sat on the bed and pressed her hands to her flushed cheeks. She felt like a young girl again, giddy and hopeful and terrified all at once. This was not supposed to happen, this feeling. She had expected practical partnership, perhaps friendship if they were lucky. She had not expected this warmth spreading through her chest, this excitement at the thought of seeing him tomorrow, this tenderness that made her want to care for him and be cared for in return. Was this love? Or the beginning of it? She had loved Samuel in her way, but it had been a quiet, comfortable love, born of habit and companionship. This felt different, brighter, and more intense, like comparing a candle to a bonfire. In his own room, Declan lay awake, replaying the evening in his mind. The way Rebecca had felt in his arms while dancing, how natural it had been to hold her close on the ride home, the sweetness of her kiss. He had told himself to be patient, to give her time, but his heart was already decided. This was the woman he wanted to build a life with, regardless of age or expectations or anything else. His father's words came back to him again. Wisdom and beauty only improve with time. He understood now what that meant. Rebecca's beauty was not the superficial prettiness of youth, but something deeper and more lasting, rooted in strength of character and depth of experience. Her wisdom showed in the way she handled challenges, in her thoughtful questions and practical solutions. She was everything he had been looking for without knowing he was looking for it. Tomorrow, he decided, he would talk to her about making their arrangement permanent. They could have a longer engagement if she wanted, but he was ready to commit, to put words to what was growing between them. The next morning dawned crisp and clear. Declan woke early as always and went to start the fire in the main room, then began preparing coffee. He was stirring the grounds when Rebecca emerged from her room, looking slightly rumpled from sleep, more beautiful than ever in her simple nightdress and wrapper. "Good morning," she said, her voice still soft with sleep. "Good morning." He poured her a cup of coffee, their fingers brushing as she took it. "Did you sleep well, eventually?" She smiled over the rim of the cup. "I had a lot to think about. So did I." He leaned against the counter, suddenly nervous. "Rebecca, I want to talk to you about something." She set down her cup, giving him her full attention. "I am listening." "Last night was perfect. Not just the dance, but everything. The way we are together, the way you fit into my life, and I hope I fit into yours." He took a breath. "I know we agreed to take our time, and we can still do that. But I want you to know my intentions. I want to marry you, Rebecca. I want to build a life with you, whatever that looks like. I want to wake up every morning with you in this house, work beside you during the day, and spend my evenings talking with you. I want everything we can have together." Rebecca's eyes had gone bright with unshed tears. "Declan, you do not have to answer now. Take whatever time you need, but I wanted you to know where I stand, what I am hoping for." He reached out and took her hand. "I am falling in love with you, Rebecca Ellis. Maybe I already have fallen. And I do not care about the years between us or what anybody thinks. All I care about is you and me and what we can build together." She was quiet for a long moment, and Declan's heart sank. He had pushed too hard, moved too fast. But then she was moving toward him, setting down her coffee and stepping into his arms. "I am falling in love with you too," she whispered against his chest. "I fought it at first, told myself it was too soon, too unlikely, but I cannot fight it anymore. Yes, Declan. Yes, I will marry you." Joy surged through him, and he lifted her off her feet, spinning her around as she laughed. When he set her down, he kissed her properly, pouring every bit of feeling into it. She responded with equal passion, her hands tangling in his hair, her body pressed close against his. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard and grinning like fools. "When?" Declan asked. "How soon can we do this properly? We need to post banns at the church. That takes 3 weeks, or we could go to the judge in town." Rebecca was practically glowing. "But I would like a real ceremony if you do not mind waiting. 3 weeks. I can wait 3 weeks." He kissed her again, quick and sweet. But just barely. They spent the day in a happy daze, going through the motions of their work but constantly finding excuses to touch, to stand close, to share smiles. That afternoon, they rode into town together to speak with Reverend Thomas about posting the banns. The elderly minister received the news with satisfaction. "I had a feeling you two would work out," he said, making notes in his ledger. "Age is nothing but a number when hearts are aligned. I will be honored to perform the ceremony." They stopped at the general store to share the news with Mrs. Patterson, the proprietor's wife who served as the informal town gossip. If they told her, the whole town would know by evening. She received the announcement with enthusiasm, immediately beginning to plan what Rebecca should wear and who should be invited. "A fall wedding, how lovely," she gushed. "And about time, too. A man needs a good woman, and goodness knows you have found one, Mr. Edwards." On the way home, they discussed practical matters. Rebecca would move into Declan's room after the wedding, and they would convert her current room into a study or storage space. They would need to make some improvements to the house before winter set in properly, and there was work to be done preparing for the cold months ahead. But underneath, the practical discussions ran a current of excitement, the knowledge that they were planning a future together. That night they sat on the porch after supper, wrapped in a blanket against the chill, watching the sun set over the mountains. "Are you scared?" Rebecca asked quietly. "Terrified," Declan admitted, "but in a good way. Like standing on the edge of something big and wonderful and knowing you are about to jump." "I know exactly what you mean." She turned in his arms to face him. "Declan, I need to be honest about something. I am afraid I will not be enough for you. That the age difference will matter more as time goes on, that you will wake up one day and regret choosing me." He cupped her face in his hands. "Look at me. You are more than enough. You are everything. And the age difference does not matter because I am not in love with your age. I am in love with you. The person you are, the way you think, the way you laugh, the way you challenge me to be better." He kissed her softly. "In 10 years, you will be 48 and I will be 34. In 20 years, you will be 58 and I will be 44. The gap stays the same, but the numbers become less important. We are building something that will outlast both of us, Rebecca. That is what matters." She kissed him then, pouring her gratitude and love and hope into it. "How did you get so wise at 24? I had good teachers. My parents, the Rodriguez family, you." He pulled her close again. "And I pay attention. I learn from people who know more than me. That is wisdom, knowing what you do not know and learning from those who do." The 3 weeks until the wedding passed in a blur of activity. Rebecca and Maria Rodriguez became fast friends, the older woman delighted to have another experienced woman in the community. Maria helped Rebecca sew a new dress for the wedding, a simple but elegant gown in deep green that brought out the red in Rebecca's hair. Declan worked harder than ever, determined to have everything in perfect order before bringing Rebecca into his life as his wife in truth. He repaired every loose board on the porch, fixed a persistent leak in the barn roof, and even attempted to build a bookshelf for the main room to hold Rebecca's books, which had been languishing in her trunk. Carlos Rodriguez helped with the heavier projects, offering advice and labor in the easy way of good neighbors. "You are a lucky man, Declan," he said as they worked on reinforcing the corral fence. "Rebecca is a treasure." "I know." Declan hammered in a nail with more force than necessary. "Sometimes I cannot believe she chose me." "She did not choose you despite your age, she chose you because of who you are." Carlos handed him another nail. "My Maria, she is 5 years older than me. When we married, people talked, but 40 years later, who remembers? Who cares? We built a good life, raised good children. That is what matters." The words comforted Declan, and he threw himself into the work with renewed energy. He wanted everything perfect for Rebecca, wanted to show her that her faith in him was not misplaced. Rebecca, meanwhile, was transforming the house into a home. She deep-cleaned every corner, made new curtains for the windows, planted bulbs in a small garden near the porch that would bloom in the spring. She canned vegetables from the Rodriguez family's generous garden, filling the shelves with jars that would sustain them through the winter. She learned the rhythms of Declan's work, anticipating his needs and offering support where she could. At night they sat together, talking and dreaming and occasionally stealing kisses that left them both breathless and eager for the wedding day to arrive. They learned each other's stories, the small details that made up a life. Declan told her about the time he broke his arm falling off a horse when he was 12, and how his mother had nursed him back to health with herbs and patience. Rebecca shared memories of her wedding to Samuel, the quiet ceremony followed by a simple meal, the years of trying to make a life on a farm that never quite prospered. "You ever feel guilty?" Rebecca asked one night, "about being happy with me when Samuel is gone?" Declan considered the question. "Do you feel guilty about being happy with me? Sometimes, like I am betraying his memory by moving on so quickly. But he would want you to be happy, would he not? If he loved you, he would want you to have a good life, even after he was gone." Declan took her hand. "And 3 years is not quick. You mourned, you honored his memory. Now you are living again. That is not betrayal, Rebecca. That is survival. That is choosing to keep going." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "You are right. Samuel was a good man, but he is gone. And you are here, and this is real. I am allowed to be happy." "You are allowed to be happy," he agreed. "And I plan to spend the rest of my life making sure you are." The wedding day arrived with perfect weather, cool and crisp with a brilliant blue sky. Rebecca woke early, her heart pounding with excitement and nerves. Maria Rodriguez arrived with her daughters to help Rebecca prepare, bringing flowers for her hair and words of encouragement. "You are beautiful," Maria said as she fastened the last button on Rebecca's dress. "And you are going to have a wonderful marriage. I see how that boy looks at you. That is love, real and true." At the church, Declan waited with Carlos and the sheriff, his hands sweating despite the cool temperature. He had never been more nervous or more certain of anything in his life. When the doors opened and Rebecca appeared, his breath caught. She was radiant, her auburn hair swept up with small white flowers tucked into the arrangement, her dress flowing gracefully as she walked toward him. But it was her smile that captured him, the pure joy on her face as she met his eyes. She was walking toward him, toward their future, and every doubt he had ever harbored vanished. They stood before Reverend Thomas, hands joined, and spoke their vows with voices that rang clear and true through the small church. Declan promised to love and honor her all the days of his life, to support her dreams and share her burdens. Rebecca promised the same, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Thomas said with satisfaction. "Mr. Edwards, you may kiss your bride." Declan did not need to be told twice. He pulled Rebecca into his arms and kissed her thoroughly to the cheers and applause of the assembled community. When they broke apart, both were grinning and Rebecca laughed through her tears. "Hello, husband," she said softly. "Hello, wife." He kissed her again, unable to help himself. The celebration afterward was held at the Rodriguez Ranch with food and music and dancing that lasted well into the evening. Declan and Rebecca moved through the crowd together, accepting congratulations and well wishes, but always finding their way back to each other. As the sun set, they slipped away from the party, riding home under a sky painted in shades of pink and gold. At the house, Declan lifted Rebecca over the threshold and she laughed, her arms around his neck. "Welcome home, Mrs. Edwards," he said, setting her down gently. "It feels like home already," she replied, looking around the room they had made together. "Because you are here." They came together in the bedroom that was now theirs, nervous and excited and full of love. Declan was gentle, mindful of her years of widowhood, and Rebecca was patient with his relative inexperience. They learned each other slowly, with laughter and whispered encouragement, and when they finally came together, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Afterward, lying in the darkness with Rebecca's head on his chest, Declan felt a contentment so deep, it was almost painful. This was what he had been searching for, this sense of completion, of finding the missing piece he had not known he was looking for. "I love you," he whispered into her hair. "I love you too." Her hand rested over his heart. "Thank you for seeing past the surface, for giving us a chance. Thank you for being brave enough to come here, for taking a risk on a young cowboy you had never met." He kissed the top of her head. "We are going to have a good life, Rebecca. I promise you that." "We already do," she replied, and in her voice he heard the same deep contentment he felt. The months that followed were not without challenges. Winter came hard to the New Mexico territory that year, with snowstorms that buried the landscape and temperatures that dropped below zero. They worked together to keep the animals safe, to maintain the house, to preserve their stores of food and fuel. There were days when the work seemed endless and the cold unbearable, but they faced it as a team, supporting and encouraging each other. Rebecca proved herself invaluable during those hard months. Her experience running a farm served her well, and her calm problem-solving approach balanced Declan's tendency to push himself too hard. She nursed him through a bout of influenza in January, refusing to leave his side despite the risk of contagion. He repaid the favor a month later when she caught the same illness, sitting by her bed and reading to her from the few books they owned. As winter gave way to spring, their partnership deepened into something unshakable. They worked the land together, planning improvements and expansion. Rebecca's herb garden flourished, providing medicines for both them and their neighbors. Declan began implementing his dream of breeding horses, buying 2 mares from a ranch in Texas, and beginning the slow work of building a reputation for quality stock. One evening in late March, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Rebecca placed her hand over her stomach with a strange expression on her face. "What is wrong?" Declan asked immediately, always alert to any sign of distress. "I am not sure." She pressed her hand more firmly. "Declan, I think I might be pregnant." He froze, joy and fear warring in his chest. "Are you sure?" "Not completely. But I am 2 months late, and this morning I was sick. I did not want to say anything until I was certain, but I think I am." She looked at him, vulnerable and hopeful. "I know the risks at my age, but I also know I want your child." Declan pulled her into his arms, his heart racing. "If you are pregnant, it is a blessing. We will face whatever comes together. But Rebecca, I need you to promise me something. If at any point this becomes dangerous for you, you have to tell me. Your life matters more than anything else. I promise." She clung to him. "I am scared, Declan, but I am also so happy I could burst." "Me too." He held her tight. "We are going to be parents. We are going to have a baby." The confirmation came a few weeks later when the doctor from town made his rounds. Rebecca was indeed pregnant, about 10 weeks along. Dr. Morrison cautioned them about the risks associated with her age, but also expressed optimism. "You are healthy and strong, Mrs. Edwards. With proper care and rest, there is no reason to expect complications. But you must not overwork yourself, and you must tell your husband immediately if anything feels wrong." He looked sternly at Declan. "You need to help her, not let her do everything." "I will take care of her," Declan promised. "Whatever she needs." True to his word, Declan became almost overprotective as Rebecca's pregnancy progressed. He took on more of the heavy work, insisting she rest frequently. Rebecca tolerated his hovering with good humor, understanding it came from love rather than a desire to control. As her belly swelled through the summer months, they prepared for the baby's arrival. Maria Rodriguez and the other women in the community rallied around Rebecca, offering advice and hand-me-down baby clothes. Declan built a cradle from oak wood, sanding it until it was smooth as silk. They converted the former spare room into a nursery, painting the walls a cheerful yellow and making curtains from soft cotton. Rebecca bloomed in pregnancy, her face glowing with health and happiness. The fears about her age receded as month after healthy month passed. She felt better than she had in years, energized by the life growing inside her. One evening in August, they lay in bed with Declan's hand resting on her belly, feeling the baby kick. "That is our child," he said with wonder. "Our son or daughter. Are you hoping for one or the other?" Rebecca asked. "I am hoping for healthy. But if I had to choose, maybe a son first, someone to help on the ranch to carry on what we are building." He paused. "But a daughter would be wonderful too. If she is anything like you, she will be unstoppable. And if he is anything like you, he will be kind and hardworking and wise beyond his years." Rebecca covered his hand with hers. "I cannot believe this is happening. After all the years of trying with Samuel, of accepting I would never have children, and now here I am, 40 years old and pregnant." "Your body was waiting for the right time, the right partner." Declan kissed her shoulder. "Everything happens when it is supposed to." Labor began on a cool September morning, earlier than expected but not dangerously so. Maria Rodriguez arrived to help, her calm competence soothing Rebecca's fears. Declan paced the main room, trying to stay out of the way but unable to leave, his heart in his throat every time he heard Rebecca cry out. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the day and into the night. Dr. Morrison arrived in the evening, examining Rebecca and pronouncing everything normal, if slow. Declan held her hand during the worst of it, letting her squeeze until his fingers went numb, murmuring encouragement and love. Finally, in the early hours of the morning, their son was born, arriving with a lusty cry that announced his presence to the world. Dr. Morrison cleaned him and wrapped him in a soft blanket, then placed him in Rebecca's arms. "You have a healthy boy," he said with satisfaction. And his mother did beautifully. Declan moved to Rebecca's side, looking down at the tiny face of his son. He had dark hair like Declan, and when he opened his eyes they were the same whiskey color as Rebecca's. He was perfect, absolutely perfect. "Hello, little one," Rebecca whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We have been waiting for you." "What should we name him?" Declan asked, unable to look away from the miracle in his wife's arms. "I was thinking James after my father, James Samuel Edwards." She looked up at Declan. "Honoring both the men who shaped my life." James Samuel Edwards. Declan tested the name. "It is perfect." He leaned down and kissed Rebecca softly. Thank you for this gift, for our son, for everything. Thank you for loving me, for making me believe I could have this." She smiled through her exhaustion. "We made something beautiful, Declan. We did." He sat carefully on the edge of the bed, putting his arm around both of them. "We really did." The months after James's birth were a blur of sleepless nights and endless feedings, of learning to be parents together. Declan proved himself a natural father, patient with the baby's crying and happy to help with the most basic tasks. He walked the floor with James at night, singing off key lullabies that somehow soothed the baby. He changed diapers without complaint and marveled at every tiny development. The first smile, the first time James gripped his finger, the way he tracked movement with his eyes. Rebecca recovered slowly from the difficult birth, but with Declan's support and the help of their neighbors, she regained her strength. Nursing James came naturally to her, and she spent hours rocking him and singing, storing up memories against the day when he would be grown. The community embraced their new family with warmth. Maria Rodriguez appointed herself unofficial grandmother, stopping by frequently to offer advice and to hold the baby. Other families brought meals and baby supplies, welcoming James into the fold of Oro Grande's children. As James grew from infant to baby to toddler, Declan and Rebecca's love deepened in ways they had not anticipated. Parenthood brought new challenges and new joys, but it also strengthened their partnership. They made decisions together, supported each other through the exhausting early years, and found joy in watching their son discover the world. On James's second birthday, they gathered with their community for a celebration at the ranch. The little boy toddled around with his friends, his laughter ringing out across the property. Declan stood with his arm around Rebecca, watching their son play. "You remember when you first stepped off that stagecoach?" he asked. Rebecca laughed. "How could I forget? You looked terrified." "I was. You were not what I expected." He pulled her closer. "You were so much more. Everything I needed without knowing I needed it. I was so afraid you would reject me, send me back." She leaned into him. "Instead, you saw past the numbers to the person underneath. You gave me a chance when you did not have to. Best decision I ever made." Declan watched James attempt to chase one of the chickens, squealing with delight. "Look at what we have built. A home, a family, a life. This is everything I wanted and more." "Wisdom and beauty only improve with time," Rebecca quoted softly. "Your father was a wise man, he was, and he would have loved you, age difference and all." Declan turned to face her fully. "You know what I realized? The age gap matters less every year. When we met, it seemed huge, 14 years. But now you are 43 and I am 29 and it feels like nothing. We are just partners, equals in every way that matters." "Declan Edwards, are you saying I am no longer your elder and better?" Rebecca teased. "You are still my better, just not my elder." He grinned. "You are my equal in age and my superior in wisdom, which seems like a fair trade." She kissed him, and he responded with the same passion and tenderness he had shown on their wedding day 4 years earlier. James came running over, demanding attention, and they scooped him up between them, laughing as he grabbed at their faces with sticky hands. This was their life now, messy and loud and perfect in its imperfection. The years continued to pass, marked by the rhythms of ranching and raising a family. James grew into a bright, curious boy, and when he was 5, Rebecca discovered she was pregnant again. This second pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because her body knew what to do this time. She delivered a daughter, Elena Maria Edwards, named for both grandmothers. Elena had Rebecca's red hair and Declan's smile, and from the moment she arrived she wrapped her father completely around her tiny finger. Raising 2 children was more challenging than one, but also more rewarding. James proved himself a protective older brother, and Elena adored him in return. The house that had once seemed too large for 2 people now felt perfectly sized for their growing family. The ranch prospered under Declan and Rebecca's joint management. His horse breeding program took off, gaining a reputation for quality throughout the territory. Her herb garden expanded into a small business, with people coming from surrounding areas to buy her remedies. They hired help during the busy seasons, young men from town who benefited from Declan's patient teaching and Rebecca's motherly oversight. As their 10th wedding anniversary approached, Declan planned a surprise for Rebecca. He arranged for Maria Rodriguez to watch the children for a night, then took Rebecca on a trip to a small hotel in Santa Fe. It was their first night away from the children since Elena's birth, and they felt both giddy with freedom and anxious to return. Over dinner, Declan took Rebecca's hand across the table. 10 years. Can you believe it? Sometimes it feels like yesterday, sometimes it feels like forever. She smiled at him, noting the lines starting to appear around his eyes, the maturity that had settled into his features. At 34, he was more handsome than ever, his youth tempered by experience and responsibility. "You have aged well, husband. You have stayed timeless, wife." It was true. Rebecca was 53 now, her hair fully silver, her face marked by the years. But to Declan she was beautiful, made more so by everything they had built together. "I want to thank you." "For what?" for taking a chance on a young cowboy who did not know what he was doing, for being patient while I learned, for building this life with me, for giving me children, for being my partner in everything. His voice grew thick. I would not be the man I am without you, Rebecca. You made me better. She squeezed his hand, her own eyes damp. You gave me a second chance at life when I thought my story was over. You saw value in me when others saw only age. You loved me when I did not think I could be loved again. She paused. These have been the happiest years of my life, Declan. Every single day with you is a gift. They spent the night in that hotel talking and loving and celebrating the decade they had shared. In the morning, they were eager to return home, to their children and their ranch and their life together. The years continued to unfold, bringing challenges and triumphs in equal measure. Drought one year, floods the next, always the unpredictable nature of ranching life. But they faced it all together, their partnership unshakable. James grew into a young man, learning the business from his father and preparing to one day take over. Alina proved herself as capable as her brother, refusing to be limited by her gender. When James turned 18, he married a girl from town, and within a year, Rebecca and Declan became grandparents. The sight of Rebecca holding her grandson, her silver hair gleaming in the sunlight, filled Declan with a contentment so deep it was almost painful. "We did good," he said, standing beside her and looking down at the sleeping infant. "We did very good." Rebecca looked up at him. "Thank you for growing old with me. Thank you for letting me catch up." He kissed her temple. "You know what? The age difference does not exist anymore. I am 45, you are 59. We are just two people who love each other, who built a life together. Your father was right. Wisdom and beauty only improve with time." She handed the baby to James's wife and took Declan's arm. "Come walk with me." They walked out to the porch where they had stood so many times over the years, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. The ranch stretched out before them, prosperous and productive, a testament to decades of hard work and dedication. "You remember that first day?" Rebecca asked. "When I stepped off the stagecoach and you looked so uncertain. I remember thinking you were not what I expected." Declan put his arm around her shoulders. "I remember Billy Morton making an idiot of himself and you putting him in his place. I remember you saying that wisdom and beauty only improve with time and thinking maybe you were different from other men." She leaned into him. "I was so afraid, Declan. Afraid of rejection, afraid of starting over, afraid of taking another chance. I was afraid too, afraid I would disappoint you, afraid I was too young to be what you needed." He tightened his arm around her. "But we were both brave enough to try, and look at what we built." They stood together as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant colors. Behind them, the house was full of life and laughter, their children and grandchildren gathering for dinner. This was their legacy, not just the land or the business, but the family they had created, the love they had cultivated over decades of partnership. "I love you," Rebecca said softly. "More than I did on our wedding day, more than I did when James was born, more with every passing year. I love you too." Declan turned her to face him, looking into eyes that had lost none of their brightness or intelligence despite the years. "You are still the most interesting, most beautiful woman I know. Age has nothing to do with it. It never did." She kissed him, and he kissed her back, and in that moment, they were not grandparents or middle-aged or any of the labels the world might put on them. They were simply Declan and Rebecca, two people who had found each other against the odds and built something extraordinary. As darkness fell and stars began to emerge, they went inside to join their family, hands linked as they had been for over 20 years. The house was warm with firelight and love, filled with the sound of voices raised in conversation and laughter. This was home, not because of the building or the land, but because they had made it so together. James called them to the table, and they took their seats surrounded by the fruits of their love. Alina was telling a story that had everyone laughing, her animated gestures so like Rebecca's that Declan felt his heart swell. The grandchildren were being entertained by their parents, and the whole scene was one of contentment and joy. Later, after everyone had gone home or to bed, Declan and Rebecca sat together in the rocking chair on the porch, Rebecca in his lap despite her protests that she was too heavy and he was too old for such things. "This is perfect," she murmured, her head on his shoulder. "This is everything," he agreed. "Everything I wanted and more than I dreamed." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, the distant lowing of cattle and the chirp of crickets. The moon rose full and bright, painting everything in silver light. Inside the house, their family slept, safe and loved. The ranch they had built together would continue to thrive, passing to the next generation and the one after that. "Declan," Rebecca said quietly. "Yes. Thank you for choosing me that day, for seeing past the surface to who I really was. For giving us a chance. Thank you for being brave enough to come, for teaching me what real partnership means." He kissed her hair. "We have had a good life, Rebecca Edwards, and we still have more to come." "Many more years," she agreed. "Growing older together, watching our family grow, building our legacy." "Wisdom and beauty improving with time," Declan said, and Rebecca laughed, the sound pure and joyful in the darkness. They sat together until the cold drove them inside, then made their way to the bedroom they had shared for over 2 decades. They prepared for bed with the easy familiarity of long partnership, and when they lay down together, Rebecca curled into Declan's side in the way that had become second nature. "Good night, husband," she said. "Good night, wife." He kissed her forehead. "I love you. I love you too, always." As sleep claimed them, wrapped in each other's arms, they were content in the knowledge that they had found something rare and precious. Against all odds and expectations, a young cowboy and an older mail-order bride had built a love story for the ages, proving that when two hearts are meant to find each other, nothing, not age nor circumstance nor the opinions of others, can keep them apart. They had taken a chance on each other and won everything that mattered, a love that would last all their days and a legacy that would outlive them both. In the morning, they would wake and begin another day of their shared life, facing whatever challenges came with the strength of their partnership. Their children would visit, their grandchildren would play in the yard, and the ranch would demand their attention. But through it all, they would face it together as they had faced everything for over 20 years. The mail-order bride who had stepped off the stagecoach in fear and hope had found not just a home but a true partner, someone who valued her for who she was rather than dismissing her for what she was not. The young cowboy who had advertised for a bride expecting convention had found instead someone extraordinary, a woman whose wisdom and beauty truly did improve with time. Their story was not one of instant passion or dramatic gestures, but of steady growth and deepening commitment, of two people choosing each other every single day and building something beautiful from that choice. It was a story of courage and wisdom, of looking past surface expectations to the truth underneath, of recognizing that love has no expiration date and partnership no age requirement. As the years continued to pass, as they moved from middle age into their elder years, their love only deepened. When Declan's hair turned as silver as Rebecca's, when they both moved with the careful deliberation of age, they still held hands on the porch at sunset. They still talked for hours about everything and nothing. They still looked at each other with the same tenderness and appreciation they had felt on their wedding day, Their grandchildren would ask them the secret to a long and happy marriage, and they would look at each other and smile. "Choose each other," Declan would say. "Every day choose each other." Rebecca would add, "And remember that wisdom and beauty only improve with time. True value is not found in youth or appearance, but in character and commitment." And so they lived, two people who had taken a chance on an unconventional arrangement and found instead the greatest gift of all. A true partnership, a deep and abiding love, and a life built together through all the seasons, lasting until their final days and beyond in the legacy they left behind.